you get a flat tire on the side of the road, you're not going to pull out the lawn chair and wait for help to come. You know, you're going to call the AAA, you're going to call a friend, you're going to do something to help yourself.
Yeah.
So I would.
So when it comes to breakups, how often do people rebound? And by that I mean like hop from one relationship to the next, the next, the next, in an attempt to get over their ex. And is this really healthy for them?
You know, I love this question. I see this all the time in my practice, and I have people so eager to jump the gun and get right into a relationship and think, okay, now I'm so ready. You know, no matter what the circumstance of what the relationship they're coming out of was, you know, if it was infidelity or they left or whatever the change was about. But what I really caution people is, even if they are beginning to see someone again, really, again, going back to that, working on themselves internally and cleaning up the consciousness of what didn't work in the prior relationship. Because if that is not done, you're just going to create more of the same. It's going to be a same relationship, different name, or it'll be slightly different, but then that mixed up consciousness will come out in a different way in the relationship. And either way, most are disappointed or even more disappointed, because if it's post-divorce, then they feel like, see, I can't get it right. So it's really worth the work to get it right, get yourself cleaned up, know what you want, and then you can rebound. If you work through those issues and then you do that relatively quickly, then you may be ready. But that's an individual question for each partner.
And in fact, I do this national study with Match.com called Singles in America, and we don't poll the Match population, we poll the American population. And one of the questions I ask is, after you've been dumped and rejected, what do you do? And 39% take time off. They take time off as much as a year to reassemble themselves, figure out what they're doing, figure out what did not work, etc., and move on. And in fact, we put people into a brain scanner who've been rejected in love, I and my brain scanning colleagues, and one of the brain regions that becomes active when you've been rejected is a brain region linked with trying to figure out your gains and your losses. So you in the therapy world, when they walk in, if they've just been dumped, they are primed to hear what you've got to say, because the brain is already trying to figure out what went wrong.
Well, I think part of my work is with grief recovery. And so I talk with my clients a lot about, breakup is a loss, like any other loss, and there's a grieving period associated with that. But the length of the grieving period can be related to the length or the emotional deepness of the relationship that came before. So if you were coming out of a relationship where you weren't all that emotionally attached anyway, you can more quickly move on to the next thing, because you've kind of already been processing through the end of the first relationship what you're looking for in the next one. What do you want to gain or lose on the next time? And so you've kind of calculated those odds and done some of the emotional completion work. But if it's a significant relationship, like coming out of a longer marriage, that I think I would recommend much more time to take a look at that relationship and make sure you're emotionally complete and that you've really processed what all happened during that time and what you want to do differently next time and who you're looking for in your next mate.
And in fact, we found in the brain that the farther you get away from the initial breakup, the less activity there is in brain regions linked with attachment. So time does heal.
Yeah.
I would add to that, however, one of the things we talk about with my clients is time does heal, but there are things you can do to activate that. It's like if you get a flat tire on the side of the road, you're not going to pull out the lawn chair and wait for help to come. You're going to call the AAA, you're going to call a friend, you're going to do something to help yourself. So I would add to that time is absolutely necessary, but there are actions you should be taking to work on yourself, to be thinking through, to be examining what happened so that you can move through it faster.
I have found in my experience as a personality consultant working with couples, the people that rebound quickly and poorly are typically need-based. In other words, their emotions need somebody. And there's something I realized 4 years ago, even in my own life. I was receiving my life from my wife rather than sharing my life with my wife. That was a rejuvenation of my whole married life, for me personally. People that rebound, they enter need-oriented relationships. What is this relationship going to do for me and my self-esteem? Because without this relationship, I'm nobody. With the relationship, I'm somebody. So that relationship actually becomes a catalyst for them feeling better about themselves. And how often do we need to feel better after we've been dumped?
Right.
So that happens a lot with those styles, and you cannot tell them anything different. They have to experience the demise of that situation. It's very difficult to convince them otherwise.
Yeah. And one of the problems, of course, with our brain studies also is when you've been rejected in love, 3 brain regions linked with intense craving and addiction become activated. So you're not just talking to a regular person walking in your office who's feeling sad. They're also profoundly addicted to the situation. And, so I think actually one of the best things to do is to treat it as an addiction. Get rid of the cards and letters. Don't write, don't call. Don't go out and be with friends, get a lot of exercise, change brain circuitry so that you can, as well as the talking therapy. And together you're going to speed up the time process.
So it sounds like what the panel's saying is that rebounding for some people is completely normal and necessary because they're not really open to the feedback otherwise, right? But if you want to learn from your breakups, you have to take the time to do the work, listen to yourself, learn your lessons, and then with time and some good biology, you should be able to get through it somewhat quickly.